Welcome aboard to that Pear podcast. I'm Steve.
And I'm Dave, and we're delighted to have you. We have such a fun one today for you. We really
Ladies
do.
and gentlemen, hold on to the edge of your seat. Prepare yourself for an adventure. We're going to live vicarious on an adventure around the world.
Yeah, literally, Tom Turcich.
Turcich.
Sorry, I didn't pronounce that right. He literally walked around the world with his dog. It took him 1,500 days, so nearly 7 years to walk around the world. It was nearly 29,000 miles, and it took him 7 years to walk around the world, on average 24 miles a day, sleeping in a tent, eating about 5,000 calories a day, pushing a buggy with them with a lot of his gear. Amazing stories, like
and
really.
it came out of him experience one of his good friends died, so it was death that forced him in a reckless pursuit of his dreams. This is an amazing conversation. It's one where you feel it just scratches that itch of adventure. It kind of provokes me to go, how can I live more adventurous in my daily life? Like even more so. Great conversation. I think, we talk learnings, we talk what motivated, we talk how do you, continue to persevere through the tough times.
And even governmental regimes, because as he walked through the world and experienced so many different countries, he talked about the subtle differences between how countries were operated and the different systems which we use to organize people. Fascinating conversation. So without further ado, we give you the wonderful Tom Turcich.
Oh, there you go. We hear you.
All right, perfect.
Are you in Pennsylvania now?
No, I'm in Cincinnati. My girlfriend started her residency here, so we moved here like 6 weeks ago. So, well, actually in Kentucky, where, never imagined I'd be living in Kentucky, but here we are.
Wow. And the fan is going on because it's actually hot, is it?
Yeah. The fans are always on.
Wow. Jesus, well, it's raining here. It's lashing, it's summer in Ireland.
It's damp. It's
Wow,
wet.
yeah.
It's, pretty bleak, really.
It's lovely.
Nice and lush, though.
It's really nice.
Yeah. You got the best greens in the world there. I remember looking out over the fields and just like 1,000 different shades of green.
Yeah.
I saw you walk through Ireland, actually. I was watching a video where it kind of showed your trail earlier, and I saw, I went in Ireland, cool.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was in Ireland in high school briefly, and then, walking across it. I have a ton of family there, so it was like a week walk, but I spent like a month there in Galway and Dundalk and all over the place with family.
Jeez. Can you still remember a lot of the places like that you walked around?
Yeah, definitely. Especially when if I look back in my journal and stuff, it really sparks the memories. But yeah, Ireland, I remember very vividly because, I just know so many people there, have so many connections there. It's easier to recall.
Wow. Really good. I love your work. Love what you've done. Fair play. Really admire your bravery and courage to pursue your truth.
Well, it's certainly within each of us. I think it's awoken this, the carpe diem. Like it seems like the whole root of when I was trying to distill. I was having so much fun reading all your stuff, and I cried a number of times watching the videos. It was like, this is so emotive. It awoken something inside me. This desire to, we are all going to die. Carpe diem. Seize the day from Dead Poet Society, and it seems almost like that Death was the greatest motivator to catalyze you on this journey. Like Anne-Marie's death and your kind of own personal fear of death. It almost sparked an awakening to live.
Yeah, that's the summer. That's exactly it. You got it, hit the nail on the head for sure. It's still motivating in a certain way, but when I was 17, definitely so. Yeah.
The bit that I admire that it took you 9 years of kind of, you didn't deflect from a dream, which is rare, especially through those formative years. From kind of 17 to whatever, 24, 25, like they're pretty years where people's perspective, paradigm, even physical location often changes, but you stayed true to this one dream, and this dream being to walk around the world. Like, how did you manage that? Because all that time period you were in college, doing university, meeting new people, pursuing different things, all sorts of different activities. How did you stay true to this dream during this period, or was this dream just pulling you there?
I think it was like, when Anne-Marie died at 17, and then I thought about, what I wanted out of life. And then I came to the World Walk through kind of just like my values. I knew I wanted to travel, I wanted adventure, I wanted understanding. And so then as time went on and I saw these other options, these other paths that you could take. It's just none of them appealed to me in the same way because they didn't fit my values and they didn't seem like they were worthwhile and they wouldn't be fulfilling. And then the same thing, it kind of replayed again when I got very ill after South America, and then I had to return home to like get treatment and all that. And when I picked up walking again, I was in a terrible state and was just like, what am I doing out here? It's like raining in Germany and Belgium, and I'm miserable. And I could just be at home with family and friends. And but the same answer kind of came, where it's like, what else would I do? You know, I had already kind of worked out that this was my ideal life. So then imagining living any other life seemed insane.
Wow, it sounds so simple, but it sounds so difficult in the current era of a million possibilities and a million lives you can live. And then the cultural programming, which each one of us have of, well, you go to school, you get a job, you try to buy a house, you might have a family, and you die.
Yeah.
Cultural programming.
Tough things to shake for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Amazing. Okay. Well, maybe let's bring it back to kind of going like, okay, so you have this idea to walk around the world, which it's about 25,000 miles to walk around the world. And I guess step one is kind of going, how do you plan it? Like, how do you plan? Like, cause
Did you use Google Maps, or did you actually old school map and draw
Pen
it
and paper.
out and pen and paper? Because like a walk like that, you're hardly just following the little blue dot, like, and through that line, like, yeah, you only have 24,900 miles to go, Tom. Keep on going. Turn left in 500 yards.
Yeah, I mean, definitely not using a paper map. No way. It's just doesn't make any sense today when you have the phone, and GPS works even without internet. So even when I was in the desert, you know, the Google Maps I could save offline, and I could still find my location. And so it was all Google Maps, and then planning the route itself was a lot of trial and error. I mean, generally for each continent, I knew where I wanted to end. You know, the first year was Panama City, the second year was Montevideo, and then it was kind of figuring out, you know, first off, what is the easiest route to get there without visa trouble, just to make it as seamless as possible, and then it was kind of feeling each country and what the roads were like, how populated it was, how dense it was, what path to take. And that I got better at that as the years went on. In the beginning, I walked a lot of roads that were terrifying and narrow and sinuous, and that I probably almost got hit by a car on, you know, 1,000 times. And then eventually I kind of worked out the balance between taking a direct path versus taking a very windy dirt road, which would be very peaceful, but take a lot longer. And it just varies country to country. Say in South America, I just took the Pan American basically the entire way, which is what most of the cyclists do, because it's the only artery that runs from Colombia all the way down. And even for a larger road, it's very small, especially compared to like American standards. It's just, at a lot of points, just a 2-lane road. Whereas, say, in Georgia or Azerbaijan, I could take these mountain roads and they're just dirt paths, and I would just follow those around the mountains, and then every once in a while pop into a city and then be back in the countryside. So it was just a lot of trial and error. And but because I have the cart as well, I had everything in this cart. I am limited to roads. I try to do some trails every once in a while, but it's just a disaster. It doesn't work.
Well, so it's like, it was like a buggy that you had, like a kid, you know, a stroller, and you loaded that up. And what weight was that? And what kind of stuff did you pack with you?
It was probably 80 pounds or so without water. I would guess maybe 70 pounds without water.
So 40 kilos.
Fully Chariot Cougar. So just a jogging stroller, like you said. And yeah, it was probably about 80 pounds. And then with water, it would get up to 95, 100, something like that. And it was a workout for sure when you're pushing up and down mountains in Colombia or Ecuador. I mean, my back was ripped from pushing this thing up and down. And then in the desert, you have to load it up with water. So it was especially heavy. But it's kind of really the only way to walk around the world, I think. I don't think you'd be able to do it with a backpack, especially because I had my dog with me. You just wouldn't be able to carry enough water and enough food to go through some of these stretches. Even in the U.S., like in Wyoming, I went nearly a week without seeing anything, and you just wouldn't be able to bring enough water or food in a backpack. And also, I just didn't want to be carrying, a 70-pound tumor on my back for 7 years. That would just destroy me. So the cart is it seems like the only way to do it. But it's nice too, because it affords you some luxuries because you're not carrying everything on your back.
Yeah,
Super.
I guess it's pros and cons, whatever way you do it. Like,
And how's Savannah now? So Savannah is your dog, and I wonder if you could tell the story of how after 4 months you decided you wanted company, or how
Yes, good. She is loving retirement.
is she?
Yeah, yeah. At first, we were both struggling a lot, and we would walk in 4 hours a day just to find something to do. But I think she's settled in now, and Kentucky's so hot that when we're outside, even she's just like by the door, so like let me back into the air conditioning. She's been outside enough at this point, and she's got a thick coat, so she's over the Kentucky summer. But so I adopted her 4 months into the walk, and the first 4 months were on my own. I had no real intention of ever getting a dog. Part of the reason why I wanted to walk around the world was to have ultimate freedom and autonomy, and to go wherever I wanted to go whenever I wanted to. But after those 4 months of walking and camping on my own and sleeping in strange places, kind of every night you just wake up, hearing something probably 3 or 4 times a night. And so there was always this thought in the back of my mind, and it got stronger as the months went on, that, man, it'd be really nice to have a dog that could listen while I slept. And then I had this strange encounter with this guy in Georgia. He was a very odd, creepy guy, and I shouldn't have gotten myself into the situation. I wouldn't today, but when I was younger, I was naive. And that encounter too was led me to think it would be nice to have a dog that could kind of sense this and protect me. And so then I walked to Texas, and I stayed with my cousin and her husband. And that first day there, I thought, I'll just go to an adoption center. I can walk to one that's not too far away, just to kind of explore this idea. And I spent about 2 hours there looking at dogs and not really connecting with any of them. And then right as I was about to leave, they brought out Savannah and her sister. They had been found on the side of a road, brought to a kill shelter, and then Austin Pets Live, the adoption center I was at, took them from a kill shelter to hopefully find a home. And I knew right away pretty much that was the right dog. And I don't think I would have adopted her, but I actually wasn't going to adopt her. I was going to leave, because this is just a thought I'm throwing around, and adopting a dog to take on a walk around the world is not something to do lightly. But as I was about to leave, this woman who was just there to look at dogs. This is what she did in her off time. She came to the adoption center just to hang out with dogs. She said, "There's puppies will be gone in 10 minutes." And so she kind of forced the issue, and I'm grateful she did. But because of that, I went back and I got Savannah. And as I was signing her paperwork, her sister was being adopted too. So the woman was right there, both there for like 10 minutes, and they were adopted. But I think it was the right play. I mean, it was definitely the right play. But at the time, the idea was to get a puppy because they would grow up on the road, and she would have no other life. And so she would be perfectly adapted to walking 24 miles a day. And that definitely bore out. She was up to the task.
And she must have been like your best friend. You chat, you'd have full on conversations.
Yeah, she was in the desert, had some conversations with her. But yeah, she was my best friend. She was best companion. She taught me a lot in a way of just kind of consistency and putting in a good day's work without complaint. There's days that are really tough out there when you're walking and it's hot, or people aren't that nice, or you just have strange encounters, or you have a stomach ache, or your muscles are cramping. And I'm sure Savannah had these as well. When we were walking through Central America and then Colombia and Ecuador, there was a lot of strays or just territorial dogs that would attack her like every day. And so every day we were fending off these dogs, and she's eating new food and all this stuff. So I'm sure she has stomach aches. She's walking just as far as I'm walking each day. And yet every day we would walk, and she would do it without complaint, and she never sat down. And whenever I was ready to go, she would go. And so she really taught me to just kind of whatever was going on internally, to just put in the day and then be satisfied at the end of it. And then when we did get to the end of the day, there was kind of nothing better than wherever we set camp, she would sit next to me. And whenever she did, it allowed me to take in where I was and really appreciate the moment and appreciate that she was there with me.
So beautiful. Like, what a wonderful metaphor. Because like a dog doesn't kind of bark at you going, hey, I'm tired, my tummy's sore. They just walk. Like, they just kind of get on with it. And like, there's something quite spiritual about it.
It's probably an easier companion than a human, in a sense. Like, you know, humans are great and wonderful and I adore them. But an animal, in a sense, it, you know, but that was a really good choice.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. I did. A lot of people said that to me on the road when I would stop, or I'd be talking to someone, and they would say, "You definitely chose the right companion." You know, when I want to stop, they're ready to stop, and when I want to go, she's ready to go. So it's perfect companion in that way.
Because you're one of 10 people who've walked around the world, and Savannah's the first dog. Did any of the others bring a dog with them, or was that a strategy which you'd heard, or was that kind of it just unfolded?
A Tom adaptation. Or innovation.
It definitely happened to me by happenstance. But I believe Steve Newman, an Ohioan, who I think was the first like recorded guy to walk around the world, he had a couple dogs, but the first dog in Afghanistan, he was raising money for UNICEF, and some raiders came. They thought he had money on his cart, and they shot at them, and that killed the dog. And then he had brought another dog for the second section of the trip. So he had a dog, but not one that unfortunately made it all the way around the world. But otherwise, yeah, I'm the only one that had a dog with me, as far as I know.
On the topic of walking, we have worn nothing but Vivo Barefoot for the last 7 years. Wow.
Same as Tom.
We were at an event during the weekend, and a friend, Tony Riddle, was talking about research done at the University of Liverpool, I believe it was, where... Nottingham, correct. Thank you, David. By wearing a barefoot shoe, such as Vivo Barefoot, actually it was Vivo Barefoot, participants' muscles in their feet increased by 60% in a month. So it's a great way of improving your foot strength, because our foot are how we typically largely engage or interact with the world at a foundational movement level.
Yeah, they're wonderful shoes. They really are. They have the full range, from whether you're, dress shoes or casual shoes or kids shoes, full range
hiking.
of them.
We wore Vivo Barefoot at a festival.
The hiking ones are brilliant. We're big believers of them, because I think, your foundation starts with your feet. They're obviously the thing that touches the ground, and your knees and hips and shoulders, and your full posture is aligned in correlation to this.
There's 15% off using the code HappyPear15, and there is a return policy that if you don't like your Vivo Barefoots, you can send them back 100 days, I believe, isn't it?
Yeah, I believe so. So yeah, check them out. Vivo Barefoot shoes.
VivoBarefoot.com. Wow. Were there times when you're safety, like I know myself, even a couple of times, and this is minuscule by comparison, I remember doing a month-long cycle around the south of France, sleeping rough. And I remember a couple of times sleeping like up on the top of a mountain, and there was a thunderstorm, and I was sleeping like in a sleeping bag with a little piece of plastic over. I didn't even have a tent. And I remember in those moments just thinking like, I might die now. I don't really know. Like, it's just absolutely bizarre. And I'm, you can almost say a prayer to a God, whether I'm even religious or not, but there's almost, you hit this divine kind of going, well, if I die, I die. And I imagine there were many moments on your adventure that you felt your safety is at risk and possibly death was around the corner, possibly.
I think the worst of it was probably when it got really cold. There was one night in the mountains of Georgia, and I was making my way.
Georgia in America?
No, Georgia,
the country. Sorry.
Okay, yeah.
Georgia, the country, and I was making my way to Tbilisi, and kind of winter was setting in, and so I didn't have winter gear yet, and there was a cold snap of a night, and we're right by this lake, so it was extra cold with the wind. And when I woke up in the morning, I mean, I barely slept at all. I brought Savannah into the sleeping bag that I had to keep myself warm and to keep her warm. And when I woke up in the morning, I almost passed out just from how cold it was and how cold I was. And I stood up too quickly. And then I just stayed on the ground, kind of huddled together, trying to warm myself for a while. So I think the cold was, and in Wyoming and Kansas too, it was brutal. I walked through that in winter, but I was better prepared for that. And I knew winter was coming at that point. So that was a little bit more manageable. There were times, definitely, where I was in danger, but kind of, I think I had done it for so long. You know, the first year maybe in Central America, where I thought maybe I'm going to get robbed or mugged. I think that's when I was at the height of my fear. But I also think that's in part due to Central America is just the most dangerous section in the world. It's just, El Salvador and Honduras and even Mexico are up there on, the highest murder rates in the world. So I was very worried about that. But then it was heightened because I didn't have any gauge. If I walked through those countries at this point, I would know when I was passing through a neighborhood versus an actually dangerous place. But in the beginning, I thought every place was dangerous because I didn't equate, having a concrete home and rebar ready on the second story to build a second story with any sort of prosperity. I thought, oh, this isn't what I'm used to in America, so this is dangerous. And so going through Central America, I definitely was afraid. And a lot of times it was unnecessarily. But, it got me through. But then over time, by the time I got to Europe and was walking North Africa and then Central Asia and Turkey, I would sleep wherever and never had a worry in my mind. It just became such normal life that even when it was a really big thunderstorm or if we got snowed in or something, it was like, well, this happened before, we'll be fine. We'll manage. We'll just hunker down a little bit more. And if the tent collapses or if I chose a bad campground, then this is going to suck for a while and I'm probably going to get wet and I'm going to have to move the camp and that's going to be a bummer and I'm not going to get a good night's sleep, but probably be all right. We have enough gear and everything else. So at a certain point, it became pretty mundane, which made it difficult in a way to just keep going and became its own kind of challenge.
Yeah, I guess the continuation must be because it was 5.5 years or 7 years in total, excluding COVID and, your illness or whatever, which that equates to how many days is that in total?
15 days.
Oh,
1,500 days or
1,500 days, something like that. Yeah, about that. Yeah.
That's a lot of Groundhog Day. I know there's different locations every day, and if you watch a 5-minute video, it looks oh my God, there's so much variety. But when you're walking 25 miles, the scenery doesn't change that much. It changes little bits, but it's it's a slow transition from one place to the other. So, monotony, and I'd imagine there's a lot of time spent with yourself. How did you manage that?
Yeah, it's very meditative for sure. Just having those empty hours and having that boredom really makes you reflect on your life, and not by it makes you reflect on your life. You don't have any choice in the matter, whether you want to or not. You're so bored, these thoughts are going to crop up and you have to consider them. And for probably about 1.5 years, that meditation was really profound and transformative. And just over the months, you will end up, if you end up walking around the world, you kind of just pick up your thoughts and put them down. And you do that enough times that you find a way to resolve all of them, or that you just become bored with them, or that they just don't interest you anymore. And so you end up just reaching sort of a floor of yourself where, your influences, your idiosyncrasies, your mistakes, your past choices, all of them just become flat in a way, and you don't have as much emotion attached to them because you've considered them with clarity so many times. But then as it goes on and you have that resolution, after that happened, I still had 3-4 more years of actual on the ground walking to do while I was at peace. And then it becomes really boring when you're in like the plains of Turkey or something like that, and the hours really drag on. And at that point, it's just a matter of like fortitude and just, this is what I signed up to do. And another lesson from the road that helped me cope with this boredom in a certain way was that I knew being out there, being out in the world is what exposes you to serendipity. And serendipity, I think today is really undervalued in a lot of ways. We try and box ourselves off and create this perfect routine and have everything optimized and insulate ourselves from any distractions at all. But on the road, serendipity is maybe the greatest virtue, because you'll have a week where you run into interesting people and you get invited into weddings, or you get invited to stay with someone, or you have an incredible meal. And then another week, there will be absolutely nothing happening. But down the line, you will run into something and something will occur that will change your life or change your perspective. And so I just came to, in a certain way, rely on just chance encounters and running into people and bumping into the world.
And how does that apply to your life now? Like, now that you are not a man walking around the world, like how much does serendipity as a value participate in your daily life today?
I like that. Participate, dance.
Yeah,
how do you dance with serendipity and bring it on your journey?
How does it show up? How does it manifest? How do you see it? Like, or is it as big a player as it was?
It's definitely not as big of a player as it was. But I think the way it contributes and the way I try and make it contribute. America is a very car-centric country, and I think that really insulates when you drive everywhere. That really insulates you. You're sort of just like driving around this big living room, and then you pull up to Chick-fil-A and you get your food, and then you drive back to your house in the air conditioning, and you're just going from like bubble to bubble to bubble. And for me, I think kind of the only way, maybe not the only way, but the one that's coming to mind right now is I just try and walk and bike everywhere if I can, just for being outside, for the chance of maybe running into someone, for having some random encounter with a stranger or some passing conversation. I just try and avoid keeping myself from being totally in a bubble. And of course, it's nice to have routine, and I write every morning, and that's important. But I do try and just leave myself open in some ways. And I think mostly that's through, if I'm going downtown, I'm going to take my bike or I'm going to walk, something like that. So it's a small way, but it leaves me open to serendipity.
That you bring it along with you. And in terms of like that balance, okay, for 7 years or 5.5 years while on the road, you had a clear direction, clear purpose, clear, I am walking around the world. I am Tom. Me and Savannah are walking around the world. How did you find that balance of wanting to be at a certain place by a certain time while also being in the moment of my legs sore, I'm not walking today, I just met someone cool, they put me up in their restaurant in Chile, I want to stay and see what's happening here, I met someone cool, I want to go. How did you manage that balance? And with that, how do you apply that to being Tom in Kentucky?
It evolved a lot. In the beginning, probably that first year and a half, again, same along with that meditation, I really was just out to prove to myself and to everyone else that I could walk around the world. And so I barely stopped at all. The first year I stopped, I think, like a month total time. And 3 of the weeks were with my cousin getting Savannah and getting her vaccinations. And so I was just a maniac. I mean, I walked 24 miles a day, every day, nonstop. And then that continued on through Colombia, Ecuador, and into Peru. And then in Peru, hotels were cheap enough, and I had walked far enough and proven enough to myself that it sort of occurred to me that you should like see some of these places that you're passing through. You should slow down a little bit. And so then I started getting a hotel every weekend in Peru, and I would aim to walk. I was still a little bit like a maniac, and I would still aim to walk what would have been, I guess, like 200 kilometers or something a week before I would allow myself to get a hotel room. So I would do these 40-kilometer days, and then I guess it's 240, actually 240 kilometers. So I'd still do 6 full days, and then I would allow myself 2 nights in a
Party
hotel.
time.
A
You
rest
earned it,
day.
Tom. You earned it.
Yeah, exactly. I it's very arbitrary, but it allowed me to, at that point, like slow down a little bit. And then as the year went on, it became much more relaxed and more dependent on visas and kind of these larger, what's the climate going to be like in this certain region? I know I wanted to walk North Africa in winter. So it's like, oh, I have this general aim, but I probably have a month or two to play with. And then the same, in Turkey or in Georgia, where it's okay, I need to get to Tbilisi before winter totally sets in. But all the time before that, that gives me a pretty big window. I have a 90-day visa in Turkey. I can use it all. And so, as I got closer to the border, maybe I would slow down in Samsun or Hirsun or something. I would slow down in these little towns on the Black Sea because, all right, I have some time to play with. But that took a while for me to slow down. And even when I got to the U.S., at the very end, I met the girlfriend that I'm with now here in Kentucky. I met her in Seattle or in Washington. And we met on Labor Day weekend, and so she had like 5 days off essentially.
This is on your way home or your way leaving? Right.
Yeah, it was on my way home. Yeah, exactly. From Seattle back to New Jersey. And so we kind of hit it off, and she was putting me up in her little apartment in this random, very tiny little town. And each day I would wake up with this, I always have this anxiety to wake up and, all right, it's time to go. We got to burn out some miles. But I wanted to stay with her. And so I'd wake up with all this anxiety, kind of hype myself up, ready to go. And then I go, wait, you want to just hang out again today? Can I slow down? I did that probably for 5 days in a row, just because it was so ingrained in me to always be going. But I was back in the US. I didn't have a visa. I could take my time. So it took a long time to adjust. And I think now that the walk is over, I think I'm just kind of getting over that, not having that, 8 hours or not even 8, more than 8 hours, just every day being packed with something that I need to do, and trying to be more content with putting in a couple hours of work, on my memoir, and then, doing whatever else and being satisfied with that. That was really difficult at the beginning, just that the totality of my day wasn't filled with something.
Yeah, that must. There's lots of questions jumping to me. Number one is the girlfriend. Did you meet your girlfriend on the road, or did you leave with the girlfriend, or how did that happen?
I met her on the road. Yeah, I met her. I stopped in a little town after crossing the Cascades, Northern Cascade National.
In America?
Yeah, in America, in Washington. And I stopped in a little town, and she happened to be doing a family medicine rotation in the town over, and we met and then just kind of hit it off, and she happened to have 5 days off, so the timing worked out amazingly. And then she kind of followed me a little bit through. She drove out to meet me in Idaho and Wyoming and Montana too, and we just hit it off, and so that was that.
And this was at the tail end of your trip rather than at the start, and saying, see you in 5 years, bye.
Yeah, no, before the walk, I ended things, or my girlfriend and I, we ended things. And we had been dating for, I guess, 3.5 years, something like that. And I knew, it would be ridiculous to ask someone to wait 5 years or to presume that you could do 5 years of long distance while I'm out there. So yeah, no, that was never happening from the offset. I wasn't going into this with a relationship. It would have been selfish and foolish.
And crazy. And I'd imagine, I'm
so
twitching to ask this one because the version of Tom that leaves, Tom has an idea of what 7 years walking around the world is going to be like. And you have this idea or whatever. And then you go and do it. And the Tom that leave and the Tom that come home are likely extraordinarily different people. Really, you only embark in this adventure because you're going to reach the depths of your soul. You're going to reach the height. You're going to reach you're going to experience so much. So that kind of journey of start to finish, you must feel like mean, are you still friends with your existing friends, your family? Like, how do you see the world differently? I suppose it's a difficult question to answer because it's a bit like Bull and the Frog. You kind of,
Yeah, no, that's a good, that's a good way to phrase it. It is this really, really gradual growth. And I think in the beginning, the lessons are very obvious and you feel the growth happening. That guy in Georgia that I met and kind of got into the situation with, that was very much a very conscious lesson where it was like, if you get a bad vibe from someone, you need to trust your gut and just go with that. And so like, there's a lesson like line in the sand kind of thing. And then when I got into Mexico and El Salvador and Honduras, and, I was talking about these neighborhoods that for me seemed like they were so poorly off, but it's actually just people living their life like anywhere else. That's another very conscious lesson that I learned. And so in the beginning, they're really defined, these lessons. But then as the years go on, the change happens just more and more gradually and more subtly that you kind of end up losing any sense of growth, and you go, how did I grow at all? And you just kind of end up feeling like you're existing and you're out there not learning anything, but you're learning a lot of things. You're learning a lot of the subtleties of how countries interact, how people make a living, all sorts of different things. But looking back on who I was at the beginning, I was just an idiot. I mean, grew up in a suburb, tall, white male, not a problem in the world. I always had food in the fridge kind of thing. And just very naive. And so I think that was the main thing, was just going out there and just interacting with the world. And so I think it's funny in a certain way, when your parent or your parents are giving you advice, and you can give whatever advice you want, but the kid's not going to listen if they haven't lived through it. And so I feel like if I met my younger self, it would be the same way. I say, hey, you got to do this, pay attention, whatever, I'd give myself advice, but I wouldn't hear it because I would just be, arrogant and dumb and naive. And, but that's why you go on an adventure, is to grow and learn and change.
Amazing. How does your relationship with time? Because 7 years is this arbitrary concept, and you're on the road and you're going, okay, I'm 100 days in, only 1,400 days more to go, or something, huge like that. And obviously in meditation, sometimes I know myself, if I've meditated for even say I'm doing a long day and we're going all out, and say I did 2 hours, it could be 2 minutes, 2 hours, 2 years. I don't know. How do you relate to time over the middle of the walk where you're 750 days in and you're going, fuck, I'm halfway?
There was a mental switch an emotional switch too that happened probably after Africa, and I realized I was on the second half of my walk, and it became more anticipatory, whereas before it was me discovering the world, and then it became, I'm going downhill now, and home is in sight in a certain way. And in that way, on that second half, it was almost less enjoyable of a walk because I was seeing the end approaching. But then for such a large scale of time, for those 7 years, I think in one of my posts, on one of my Instagram posts, I talk about it a little bit, but the 7 years felt like 20 years. I mean, every day was just so packed with newness, and your brain is just constantly adapting to new things and new cultures. And every night I'm finding a different place to sleep and interacting with new people, trying new foods, seeing a new part of the world. And so now it feels like the days go by really quickly because there's just not as much newness to adapt to. While when I was out there, it's just a flood constantly. And every day is just really, really long and drawn out, even in hindsight.
Jeez, hearing you talk just makes me want to go on an adventure.
But it also makes me kind of go that it happens, it's the ultimate meditation because it's so gradual. It's such it's there is so much newness, but there's so much just walking. Like that sounds so stupid to say, like, because we're talking to you who's walked around the world. But when I put I imagine being in your footsteps. It's showing up every day, pushing your carriage, walking along. Obviously you need to eat lots of food because you're probably burning tons of calories. So you got to find food and then find shelter. It's back to the basics of humanity: shelter, food, survive. And in your case, walk 24 miles a day.
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason I got Savannah was very much that original reason we joined with wolves or dogs in the first place was because we wanted someone to protect camp, and that's why I got Savannah. And so it was in a lot of ways back to a sort of I don't want to say it's not primordial, but like a sort of reversion in a way to live, and it was very satisfying. I mean, it was very satisfying. It's very simple. Like you said, get up and walk. I do it with my dog. It's amazing. We find a place to sleep, get some food, see the world. It was a great life. It was very difficult, but it was a great life.
But yeah, I think difficulty gives... Hey, my turn.
Okay, your turn.
Well, difficulty gives rise...
task.
Like, difficulty gives rise to, like, life will test you before it rewards you or treasure you, that way. So that there needs to be, night and day. There's the duality of life. So I think the greater the challenge, the greater the reward ultimately in life. But one simple question, as the 5-year-old inside me goes, Tom, will you tell me one of your favorite stories on your trip? I love hearing stories.
Man, there's a lot of stories.
Right, so there's so many, but one that comes to your mind anyway. It doesn't have to be your all-time favorite.
Sure, yeah. Let's say, I mean, the one that comes to mind, but I've told this before, so I'm trying to think of something else for you guys. I would say, all right, we'll say in Colombia, I had my axle break in La Plata Huila. It's like up in the mountains, kind of in the coffee growing region. And I was waiting for a new axle to be shipped because it's this weird specific axle. So I was waiting for that to be shipped down. And in the meantime, I thought, all right, I'm going to go over this pass with just me and Savannah and my backpack. And I'll leave the cart in this hotel and I'll walk over to the next city. It's like I think a 4-day walk. And there's towns on this pass spread out far enough that I can just, if I push myself, I can get to a little hostel or something every night, a little room every night, and be fine. And so Savannah and I did this walk, and it was really special, this section, because it was in the ecosystem up there after that first day is a paramo, which is this high altitude above the timberline kind of rainforest in a way, where it's raining 300 plus days a year, but it's above the timberline, so there's no trees, and so you have moss that's grown out like crazy. There's waterfalls, there's ferns blooming, there's tapirs, there's spotted bears or spectacled bears, and it's like this really, really mystical kind of Alice in Wonderlandy environment. And Savannah and I were walking this dirt road. The whole time we saw maybe a bus here and there that would pass, but it's just me and her in the backpack and a rain jacket. And each night, these towns were about 30 miles apart from each other. We'd have to walk all day. But I remember getting into this one town at night, and it's so remote, and there's only a few little street lights, the amber street lights, and it felt like we're like underwater because it's so sort of dreamy, and these lights are glowing and the stars are overhead. And I remember getting into this, and the one hostel didn't have any rooms. It was probably there's probably 3 rooms in the place anyway, and then this other one let me in, and I had this very comfortable. I mean, it wasn't a comfortable mattress, but when you're out there walking for 30 miles, like if you have a mattress, it's fantastic. And I'm in this little wooden room, and there's posters of Blink-182 and Britney Spears and like Nirvana posters around in the middle of Colombia. And then I went downstairs, had some great soup and some chicken and rice. And so it's not, I mean, that's pretty much it. It's not a story, but this is the memory that comes to mind that I haven't told on a podcast. And it's kind of one of these things that, unless you're out there, like it was such a unique way to experience this ecosystem, because I know people go to this place. It's a national park, but you go probably pop in and you see it and you go, oh, this is beautiful, whatever. But to like live 4 days in this very dreamy, surreal ecosystem with just my backpack and Savannah walking with me, it was like, that was as good of walking as I ever had out there.
It's even listening to you describe it. You're it's just beautiful. I feel
Because it's a great metaphor, like that idea, like if you hike a mountain, it's very different to if you were helicoptered and just dropped on the top. You perceive it so different, and you value the pursuit of getting there so much different. And it's a bit like, as you said, walking through that place for 4 days. You felt it so much more than if you were in a bus.
and even
looking out
seeing
the
you
window.
describe it, like you're in your face. You can like it's like wow, that feeling is wow, looks
It's,
incredible.
Even to experience it vicariously, I'm like, yeah, that was a cool adventure. Even listening to your adventure.
Those speckled-eyed bears are cool. Paddington.
I think part of traveling that way, if you're cycling or walking, what's great about it is that you're not putting a lot of weight on the highlights. You're not putting a lot of weight on Machu Picchu or the Eiffel Tower. And those places, they're like destinations for a reason, because they are generally spectacular. But when you're walking through a place or you're cycling through a place, you really come to value all the in between. And when you discover a mom and pop restaurant where you had just cycled 100 kilometers, 180 kilometers, or you had just walked 40 kilometers and you come to this little mom and pop restaurant, sometimes it's junk, but sometimes it will be so good and this woman cares so much about her meal and it will be the best meal you ever had. And that happens so many times. And so you have these like really vivid memories and experiences of places because you kind of earn them in a certain way. You're not just showing up and going, well, what do you have to offer me? You show up and you exist there, and whatever they have is seems like an abundance.
Like it makes me think of when I was a younger man, I was definitely trying to do places. Like you'd go to a place and you'd go to, as you said, Machu Picchu, or you'd go to, you'd tick these places that you were meant to go to. And then as I've got older, and I'm sure Steve kind of agrees with it, we're about 43 now. And I'd kind of go that, like if someone asked me that question, oh, where was your favorite place in the world? And I'd kind of go, I'm less into the place. It's more about the experience and who I'm there with. Like the place is kind of, sure, there's pretty places and they look beautiful, but ultimately it's how you feel in a place is the experience within it. And it's ultimately like the people you're with and the environment and where your head is at, really. Is that kind of what you experienced on your 1,500 day or your 1,500 day walk?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, definitely. There at a certain point, places, like the beauty of a place is secondary. I think at the beginning of your travels, at least for me, when I came to Lake Atitlan in Guatemala, the most beautiful place I'd ever seen. It was incredible. And that in itself just really amazed me and wowed me. And it's kind of unfortunate because you do lose that a little bit. And so you see these beautiful places, and it is nice to be at a beautiful place. But again, like you said, it's more about what you're doing, who you're with, what you're feeling, than it is about the place. That's just sort of the backdrop to things. And so what I think, becomes more important is, there's this lesson, I think, that comes from traveling a lot and being in all these different places where the backdrop, the landscapes aren't as important, but then the systems and like the country itself and the politics and the infrastructure, all that becomes extra important. And because you see how it affects everyone. If people are there's a subtle difference in a democracy and in an autocracy. And I passed through a few autocracies, dictatorships, and a bunch of democracies. And whenever you get into a democracy, the people are just relaxed. And so like you realize after traveling enough that there are things that matter more than just a beautiful landscape. Like there's parts of Algeria that are stunning and beautiful, but there's this weird sort of little psychology that happens when you're under this dictatorship. People can't express themselves freely. And so, yeah, there's all these different layers to it. But I think the beauty of a place ends up just being, in a certain way, secondary after traveling enough.
Wow. And in terms of even in that topic of the people, because I hadn't thought about that you would slowly see all these political systems and means of which we manage ourselves as humans on the planet, where there's certain kind of systems or certain environments that you went, boom, that like they've got something really special here. Like in my head, I would go, Bhutan has always been a place I've been very curious about. And, you know, they measure gross national happiness and it's not GDP and it's very eco-conscious. And I'm very curious about it because it just seems like, you know, their values, I espouse to their values and I idealize them or romanticize them. And I wonder within your travels, were there certain systems or countries that you thought they've got a lot right? Like, you know, American culture or Western culture is often idealized as, yes, this is the pinnacle of human existence. What was your experience with that?
I mean, every country has, you know, its pros and cons. There's no like perfect place. But I think that the country maybe that changed me from the beginning, like the most in a certain way, was Denmark. Just from the infrastructure, and I've never been to the Netherlands, but coming from America, again, very car centric place, and then being in Denmark and Copenhagen where people are riding their bikes everywhere, that was a very eye opener. And the first 2 years of walking were very insular. And so then after that, it became much more about experience the world and seeing these contrasts. And so Denmark was probably the first time where I went, oh, well, there's like a different way to do this thing. And so that was very transformative, and just being able to see that a city could be built not around automobiles like it is here. But then Georgia as well is way up there for a country that I just have an incredible amount of respect for. It's a really tiny country. 3 million people. They are extremely free market, and they're extremely like free movement of people. I could go and stay there for 365 days a year if I want it, just because that's how open their visa program is. And then on top of it, they're extremely democratic, and they're sort of fighting Russian influence and this Russian puppet president who had run in the past. He's not elected anymore. But it's this country that's a young democracy, and they're becoming more and more democratic. And that really drove home to me, seeing these people and how vibrant they were and how beautiful the culture was. And like the restaurants were amazing. The art was amazing. The conversations were fantastic. And a lot of it stemmed from their pride in being able to everyone have an opinion, and everyone being able to express their opinion. And then right next to it, you go to Azerbaijan, where you go to Uzbekistan, and all of a sudden there's this weird tension in the air, and you just can't express yourself in the same way. And the culture doesn't feel like it has the same depth, and the restaurants don't feel like they have the same sort of joie de vivre or whatever. I don't know, what is it? Whatever that French expression is. It just misses something. And so I really saw like the power of democracy in such a subtle but pervasive way. And so for me, it kind of like, at this point, my political opinion is basically just make every country as democratic as possible. And so that's pretty much, that's what I came away with.
Well, amazing that you actually got to experience it and compare and contrast. Like, to start to land this conversation, obviously this is a question you're asked loads, but I think there's such relevance to anyone. And it seems ridiculous to ask you to still like 1,500 days traveling on the road, walking and all that. But were there obvious learnings? Because I heard you talk about that all humans, no matter where you were in the world, that there's this spirit of kindness. And I think to me, that's something that's so beautiful to hear. It's like, wow, we are all simply trying to do our best and get along in this world.
Yeah, I mean, like sort of related to the last thing I said is, part of the reason why you realize democracy is so important and why systems are so important is because underneath that, the more fundamental lesson is that it's just people everywhere, and there's good people everywhere. It's people trying to make a little money and spend time with their family. Like that is everywhere. And when I would enter these countries, some of them, more dangerous than others and ostensibly or not, perceived or not. I would always have people reaching out to me saying, you got to be careful here. You don't know. Or even in some places, they'd say the next village, you got to be careful in the next village. They'll steal, the clothes right off of your back. And you get there and it's just people. And I get this question, how can you walk around the world? As if people are walking everywhere. You're just passing through someone else's town. You're new there, but someone is walking there. Kids are walking to school there. People are walking to work there. So all that is just people. People are the same everywhere, which is very reassuring. And again, it just makes the systems that much more important, because you realize there are really intelligent, driven people that are smarter than I am, are smarter than all of us, and that are more driven than us and are more creative and could offer more to the world. But maybe they're, who knows what they're stuck doing. They're stuck in the deserts of Peru, and they'll never leave because they have a proving passport and they don't have an Irish passport or an American passport. And so it just makes, I think that's one of the fundamental lessons for sure of the walk, is that, no matter where you go, it's just people.
Wow. And what about your reflections on life? Because obviously you have a lot of time to ponder it, and now you're back home and you're back in American culture. You're back in the great Western democracy, and you probably you've had time now to kind of distill it and reflect back on some of what you've gone. And like, I can't imagine that you're the same person looking at the same thing. Like, the person that left, the Tom that left and, worked in his job and worked in a restaurant and worked in solar panel companies and whatever to raise money for this adventure, versus the Tom that's back now. Like you must have perspectives on life or views on it and want to put them into action. Like, what kind of inspires you now? What motivates you? What reflections do you have on this experience called life that we're all fumbling along through?
Yeah, it's challenging being back for sure, because you are just sort of so removed from this culture that I saw is not the ultimate culture. It's just a culture, and so it becomes difficult because I just compare it all the time, whereas before I just lived in it. So that's challenging. But as far as like life and that perspective, I think things that were driven home to me were just value. I try and value my time. Like, that has the highest priority, versus money. If I can own my own time, then that's a win for me. And then on top of that, I sort of measure everything with happiness. Like, happiness is the only measure. The reason you pursue everything is to be happy. The reason you want money is so you can have security, so you can relax and you can spend time with your family and you can be happy. And so sort of keeping that in mind and measuring all of my actions and my interactions from that frame, I think leads me to live a little bit differently than a lot of people would. Going back to very simply biking or walking to to downtown or to a bar or to a friend's place, something like that. I think when you look at the car, it's very efficient at getting you there as quickly as possible. But there is going to be hours in my day where I'm probably just going to be relaxing in bed, or maybe I'll watch some television or whatever. It's like, I don't really need to get there as quickly as possible. It's better to take a walk, to walk there or to bike there, because then I'm outside and I'm enjoying the air and I'm experiencing the world. Maybe I run into someone, maybe I have a random interaction kind of thing like that. So I feel like is a small shift that I wouldn't have made before, where it was much more, everything was based on efficiency. And now it's more, okay, how much happiness is this thing going to bring me? And is there a way to be happier? And so I think that's probably the primary shift. And it has a lot of different implications, and it's very subtle, but it's definitely a question that's always in my head.
And how does it relate to work now? Because, the way we've all kind of, you know, you work to live, kind of like, you know, or you live to work. Like in Western culture, most of us live to work. Like work is just takes up the majority of our adult life. And you wandering around the world, you've seen the way so many different people exist. And what are your own reflections with your own life and looking at work now? Do you see it differently? Do you want to get a job?
No. I mean, there's value in definitely like the social aspect. That there's a certain part of that I miss. I like this, like having, people to hang out with. But yeah, my goal is definitely to work as little as possible and on something that I enjoy doing. And fortunately, it seems like it's working out where, I'm working on a memoir. I have a children's book, hopefully, maybe today even, I'll start selling. And
Cool. What's it called?
It's Savannah's World of Adventure, crossing the Andes. So I'm hoping to do a whole series for every country we walk through, but the first one is crossing the Andes, and it's Savannah's adventure over that.
Very
And
cool.
yeah, so you learn a little bit about the world, see the world, and have an adventure as well. So doing writing, speaking engagements. So in a certain way, I'm very fortunate because the speaking engagements pay fairly well and they're one-offs. And then the writing satisfies a lot of my creative urges. But, I don't know. People need money, so you got to work sometimes. And that's, I did before the walk, like you said, putting in solar panels and working at a restaurant. There's times I work 3 jobs at a time. When I was doing solar panels, I was working 14, 16-hour days. My boss was a maniac, but made great money, and it helped me pay off my loans. So I think in a certain point, it's, knowing what you want. Money is a tool, obviously, and it's. I think it's just a matter of measuring it properly and how much you need of it to get what you want in a certain way, and knowing why do you want this thing at once. So for me, the World Walk was what I wanted to achieve, and in order to do that, I had to work like crazy for years and years and years to give myself a chance of doing it. But now I am fortunate enough where I don't need to work 16-hour days anymore to achieve what I want, and I can just hang out with Savannah and write and be content.
Oh, content. That's
what does it for anyone listening? Because it was a question that came to me when I was reading about you and listening about you. Is like, how much did it cost you to walk around the world? Like, how much did you need to save?
The primary, I needed to work to pay off my student loans, and but the first 2 years was about $14,000, so not much, less than minimum wage. And then the next 5 years, I don't know exactly, but I would say probably like $30,000 a year, and that was living pretty flush. You can definitely do it a lot cheaper. The 14,000 even that was like okay in the Americas. The Americas were very affordable. But I started a Patreon when I got to Europe because Europe was just much more expensive and densely populated. So I needed to get more hotels more often than I did in the Americas. But yeah, with flights and everything, it was probably like $30,000 a year, once I was out of the Americas.
Wow.
It's incredible. I love the fact that you're almost applying Dave heralded or spoke the ideals about Bhutan, like gross domestic happiness. And it seems like you're trying to optimize your life to maximize your time, because time being your ultimate value, and then in the pursuit of happiness and contentment.
But that goes loggerheads against current culture. So like, it's going to test your own resolution, because current culture does not kind of optimize for happiness. It optimizes for
efficiency and productivity
and financial, financial gain.
There's a very noticeable consumerism that I don't have, and it's not that to say that I don't like nice things. I do like nice things. I want to live in a historic house with lots of character, and I want plants in my house to make for a nice environment. But I do notice I don't I like this thing worked, this certain type of consumerism has worked out of me from just living out of a baby carriage for 7 years that everyone else has, where it seems like there's like a thing for everything, for every little slight inconvenience. There's one thing you can buy for that. And if it isn't that thing, it's not maximally efficient, and whatever you have is subpar. And so it seems like that there's a lot of unnecessary purchasing of things when maybe the thing you have will already do, and it won't be totally optimized, but it's just fine. So yeah, there's a certain mindset, I think, that has changed in me, that I now notice that I probably had before in other people, in that Western just consumerism.
It's amazing.
Final question, just one, and it's a real obvious question, but it's something that I feel propelled or driven or need to. I feel like I want to ask you, just simple, like to younger Tom, what would you tell younger Tom, or someone listening who's there kind of, they're at that age and they're kind of, all of us who's looking for more out of life and is kind of going, there's an itch there that they want to scratch. What would you say?
And it's probably not realistic that they're going to walk around the world, because there's only 10 people.
But challenge can mean anything to someone. Challenge doesn't mean walking around the world.
Well, this is the lesson that I gave at the end of my keynote, which is to be more reckless. And that is something that when Anne-Marie died, that I realized you needed to do, is that you're dead. The game is already over. There's no way out. You lost the game. But you're here and you're alive. So, and you are smarter and stronger than you realize, and you are more adaptable than you realize. So you have to be a little bit reckless, and reckless not in the sense of dismissing your friends and family, but be more reckless in pursuit of your dreams, in failing 1,000 times and then learning and adapting. So that's what I was saying. Be more reckless.
Amen. I love that. Tom, anyone listening who goes super inspired, how can I support you? How can I buy your memoir? How can I buy your book? How can I support your cause? How can they learn more? I tried to find an Instagram. I couldn't find you.
It's walking around the world. It's an easy one.
Okay, right.
The World Walk.
Okay,
the World Walk. Yeah, it's easy. Yeah.
The World Walk on Instagram. I have a Substack that I'm writing about, sort of taking the best of everything from around the world and applying that on how to live better day to day. So you can do that. It's called Upon Reentry. And then the children's book, hopefully out today. It'll be on my Instagram, be on my website, Tom Turcich. The memoir, hopefully coming out in 7-8 months, something like that. But yeah, it's all on tomturcich.com. You can find it on there.
Well done. You're amazing.
I love chatting with you. Love what you're doing. Congratulations.
And
the person you've become.
Yeah, I really look forward to listening to your book.
Yeah, it was a pleasure talking with you guys. Yes, good questions. I appreciate it.
A pleasure. And if you ever come to Ireland, come visit. We have a cool little part of the world.
But maybe you're done traveling.
Maybe you're done traveling. You just want to stay at home in Savannah.
No, I'll be back in Ireland at some point. I have no doubt about it.
Oh, send on our numbers. We've got a farm, and you can camp in our garden if you want to camp, or we can put you up.
Spare room. I'll have a spare room with a nice mattress, I hope.
Even better.
Well, congratulations, Tom Turcich. You're some man, as we'd say here in Ireland. Some man. And best of luck with your book.
Yeah, it was great talking with you guys.
I want to walk around the world. I want to walk around the world. I want to walk around the world. I want to go on an adventure.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you join us on a walk, we're going to start our adventure around the world.
No, but I might walk to work tomorrow.
Yeah, and I think it's a nice reminder about like the few things that we got there. Lizzie was talking about the importance of the small, little kind of spontaneous encounter, and I like that reckless pursuit of your dreams.
I like the idea of optimizing your day for serendipity. That sounds hilarious. Like that sounds really, really interesting. How do I optimize my day for serendipity? Well, it's probably walking and moving around in environments.
But it's also not being overly attached to getting there by a certain time. It's also having that moment to smell the rose along the way.
One feeling I got from the conversation was the idea that efficiency is something that we optimize for in most of Western culture in our societies, whereas he kind of talked about, well, optimizing my life for happiness is a really wonderful thing to do. So yeah, that's a big takeaway I got. So I look forward to reading his book whenever it comes out. Well, I don't say reading, I'm going to say listen, because that's how I can.
And I look forward to meeting him. Hopefully he comes down the spare room someday. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Wishing you a day full of spontaneity, happiness, joy and adventure, and ultimately.
Yeah, and if you enjoyed this podcast, do check out other ones, because we've done 130 episodes now or so,
And we love it.
Yeah.
Wishing you a great day.
Bye. 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 Bye.